I just want to say thank you for joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. And I hope everybody sits back and enjoys the discussion, and we'll catch up with you a little later in the evening.
Great. Well, thank you, Stan, and Terry's not here tonight, but thank you and the temple for having me. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly and hope that everyone sees what I see. So this book is a labor of love about the land that I love. It came out in late 2016, and it's something I worked on for over 5 years. And it's very personal as well as collective. I grew up in the Catskills. My parents still live there. So, the project is really based on a lifelong experience, beginning as a child. When I went to some of the hotels as a teenager, when I worked at one of the hotels, and it culminated with really an exploration and a larger fascination with deeper rooted issues, not only about the Borscht Belt, but about the process of time and really the transformations that happen from the past to the present. So what we're going to do tonight is really move into what I call time traveling. We're going to look at the rise and the fall of the Catskills, its impact, its contemporary, and really what I always call the luscious chaos that I found in its landscape. I called the book Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land because I love the idea of going back to a place that was so celebrated and so cherished. I'm going to start with a quote by Cartier-Bresson. Photographers deal in things which are continually vanishing, and when they have vanished, there is no contrivance on earth which can make them come back again. The Borscht Belt was located and still is 90 miles of New York City, northwest, and 250 miles from Boston, which I know a lot of people are tuning in from tonight. Its proximity to New York City is really what allowed it to boom. And that county highlighted in red is Sullivan County, but it also is comprised of Ulster County and Orange County. And in its heyday, there were over 538 hotels and 50,000 bungalow colonies. So my book, it's important to say that by the time I began this project in 2011, most of those hotels had disappeared. Various methods, closing down, burning down, being demolished. My book highlights about 50 or 60 different locations. In blue are the hotels, and in gold are the bungalow colonies that I found. These were all abandoned locations. Some locations have been repurposed into hotels, meditation centers, ashrams, rehabilitation centers, and more. But for me, it was important to kind of highlight these hotels that I knew, and having had the book out now 5+ years, I knew that they would eventually be completely gone, eradicated. And looking at this map now, at least half of them are no longer, meaning there's no trace in the woods of a pool or a driveway or even a foundation. So this is like an image that one might have seen when driving up Route 17. And this just shows like a little selection of all of the offerings of the Borscht Belt. The Pines, the Browns, the Windsor, the Commodore, the Haydn, the Aladdin, obviously known year round and for its summer, but really this huge vacation destination for American Jews, built because of anti-Semitism, but thriving because Jews found a place to be themselves, a place where they were accepted. It was a year-round destination vacation offering leisure, entertainment. It was the birthplace of stand-up comedy. And on the left, you have the Laurels. On the top is also the Laurels. And on the right is the Flagler. Everything that I really heard about growing up in the Borscht Belt was always, these tall tales about how magical it was, and the shows and the entertainment, and really just these stories were just such part of my childhood. But looking at the history on the top left is the Imperial Room at the Concord. That seated over 3,000 people, and it was the biggest showroom in the United States when it opened. On the bottom is the Nevele's Stardust Lounge, also a huge hotel. And then there's the Twizzle Stick Lounge at the Raleigh. The book has 129 photographs, and there are three essays, one that I wrote. And when I sat down to write the essay, the first words that came into my mind were the beginning of the essay. And it goes, I grew up in the mountains, or as others called it, the country, as if no other mountains or country existed anyplace else on earth. And for me, and I think for a distinct group of people, particularly American Jews, that declaration is true because the Borscht Belt was the place to be. It is still spoken of as the mountains, the country, number one in the nation for a zestful, restful vacation, Sullivan County. And all that I heard about the Catskills, living some of it as a child and then working at the Concord as a teenager, was this word fun. My grandmother and grandfather met when my grandmother was hitchhiking in South Fallsburg, and that was the union of my father's side of the family. And my mother's family went up there too to various bungalow colonies. So this echo of fun really just kind of rang true. But I knew that when I started this project, I really needed to dig deeper. I wanted to understand why the Borscht Belt began, why it failed, why so many of the hotels and bungalow colonies that I had found looked the way they did, and really what was the history of the region in almost an attempt to think about what could be its future. So we're going to go back early in time. I know you're here for the Borscht Belt, but this is a little bit of a lesson of the land. The earliest people to settle or really live in the area known as the Borscht Belt, also present day New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the Hudson Valley, were the Lenape Indian tribe. They were a peaceful hunter gatherer tribe. These are some early drawings from European settlers. The Lenape Indians were eventually pushed out by Dutch and German settlers who had heard of the rumored riches of the Catskills. And when I say riches, it's not money, it's land and it's resources. And this is an early drawing predating the invention of photography from the late 1700s of Mongup Falls, just showing these two people at the bottom of this falls admiring the beauty of the Catskills. So when German and Dutch settlers came in, they unfortunately displaced and pushed out the Lenape Indian tribe. You have to think of a very rocky, mountainous, rugged region. It was inaccessible from New York City. There were dirt roads, if any roads that led up. There was no highway, no trains, nothing. It was very desolate. And what happened was there was a ton of trees. Well, these trees were logged and cut down, and they were pushed down the Delaware River to build up cities like Philadelphia and New York City. What slowly started to happen, and this is the Delaware River, that's Daniel Skinner at the bottom, very famous falls that people still go swimming, Skinner's Falls. What started to happen was the land started to become depleted. And once that tourism, or sorry, once that early industry of cutting down trees and the lumber industry died out, the next industry comes to take its place about 30 or 40 years later during the Civil War, and that was the tanning industry. And this is a tannery in Ellenville, and the falls powered the tannery. They would take bark off of trees and tan it into leather. Sullivan County was a huge part of the tanning industry when the Civil War was happening and even beyond. And on the top is the Monticello Tannery, and on the bottom is the Hanford Mills Tannery. What happens here is really crucial because with the tanneries come the roads, and with the roads come the railroad. So, what starts to build is this accessibility of the Catskills to New York City and outlying areas. And the first visitors to the area are not Jews. We know the Borscht Belt to be this vacation destination, this kind of paradise for Jews. Well, the first visitors were lovers of nature, fishermen, writers, and artists. And these are people fly fishing on the Beaverkill River and the Beaverkill Inn, all the way up in Roscoe, a very early, early hotel. Also around this time, this painting was made. It's by Asher Durand, and it depicts Catterskill Falls. It's a painting that has become an icon of American landscape painting. Kindred Spirits shows these two men contemplating nature at the edge of this rock. You can see the vista in the background, and there's all these little icons in the painting, Memento Mori, that are all about time and time's mutability, and it's shifting constantly. But this painting became a real icon, as did the Catskills, drawing people from all walks of life. So what happens around 1900, and this is the Kayamisha Casino, Sullivan County catches railroad fever. Boosted by the railroads, a tourism trade that began with fishermen and artisan writers begins to blossom. And once a very desolate industrial region, the area becomes a tourist destination, offering fresh air, clean water, local produce, and entertainment. Here is a really early postcard. It's a little bit north of the Borscht Belt, but it's greetings from the Catskill Mountains and everything that it had: winter sports, bathing, freshwater fishing, elves, which I've yet to see, good hunting, pretty girls, cows, animals, and really just a real respite from New York City. This is an early postcard from the regatta at White Lake. One of the things I really enjoyed about this project is I was able to piece together, because there was so much visual ephemera, so many postcards produced during this time, where I began to put together this timeline to really see how everything just started to grow. Around this time, when this early wave of tourism was happening, the area became a haven for those afflicted with tuberculosis. The Loomis Sanitarium at the top, which remnants of it are still left today, and the bottom is the Workmen's Circle Sanitarium in Liberty. The thought was that people that had tuberculosis could go up to the area and fresh air would alleviate its symptoms. But locals detested that the area was becoming known as a destination for the sick, and they put a lot of pressure on the sanitarium owners to close, and they did. In addition, around this time, the polio epidemic had struck in America, and people were told to avoid large crowds, swimming pools. It has some reflections to the pandemic we just experienced, where people just stopped going. So, what begins to happen is also this, or this was actually already happening. This is a magazine distributed in America in 1908. It was called Jew Jokes. In the first half of the 20th century, discrimination against Jews was widespread. Anti Semitism affected employment, social club membership, and vacation access. This is a seemingly beautiful pamphlet of a really lovely hotel called the Craigsmore Inn in 1910. Watercolor paper, beautiful photographs printed, and I'm going to lead your eyes to the left-hand side of this slide. Owning to neighborhood preferences, Hebrews are requested not to apply. I've seen multiple documents, from beautiful brochures to letters saying, "Dear Mr. Silverberg, we do not employ your kind." Not only Jews trying to vacation, but trying to work at many of these resorts. And it is quite unfortunate that these kind of cycles of hate still continue towards not only Jews, but many different groups. So what happens is you have this area, and it's just ripe for the taking, recognizing a growing Jewish immigrant population with a desire to experience an American lifestyle, but not be persecuted, not be shut out. Jewish investors and entrepreneurs began to buy properties in the area. There was already accessibility. This is the train station that went right into Liberty. On the left is the Lenin Hotel, which I will bring you into in a little bit when I photographed it. So they began to buy properties in the region, small farms, boarding houses, and small hotels. To many immigrants, the landscape looked so much like their Eastern European homes that there was this draw to the Catskills, where they felt this level of being at ease, also learning how to farm again and owning farms again. So here we go, is really the beginnings of the Borscht Belt, created because Jews were banned from going to many destinations in this country. Greetings from Sullivan County, New York, the Hillig Studios. This is the start of what was Grossinger's, purchased In 1914, a small farmhouse, no plumbing, no heating, nothing. And this was the original house at Grossinger's. Many of you here might know Grossinger's. It really became this kind of mecca. Its slogan was Grossinger's has everything, because it did. On the left is the main building, the original main building, and on the right is an early photograph of the Grossinger's staff. So 538 hotels. I mean, so many hotels. And that number is likely incorrect. It actually is probably bigger than that. But Grossinger's had its own zip code. It had an Olympic indoor and outdoor skating rink. It had its own airport. This is an aerial view of it. And it really did have everything. You did not have to leave. It was the destination for celebrities. It was the destination for all kind of wonderful events, honeymoons and birthdays, and year after year people went. But not only was there Grossinger's, there was the Hotel Zeiger, which went by multiple names. When I found it, it was called the El Dorado. All mid-century, all competing with one another for the nicer lobbies, the best shows, the best food. This is the Concord. I remember this staircase as a child. The story I think I mentioned, my grandparents met while my grandmother was hitchhiking. So my parents and my dad went up there as a kid. And in 1980, he got a job up there. And we moved up there. And I remember going to the Concord with my grandparents. My grandpa was a card shark. And we were never guests at any of the hotels. We lived right down the street. But I remember running up and down this staircase. And I've learned that the staircase was not built actually to run up and down or even use. It was really a staircase used to like parade. It was an aesthetic staircase built by Morris Lapidus, who built many hotels, including the Concord, the Fontainebleau, hotels in Las Vegas. I just love this postcard because it brings me back. The Falls View, another hotel. I love this postcard because it shows really to me like what the Catskills is. It's this location set against this gorgeous backdrop, and you can see the mountains in the back, the mid-century modern architecture and those really like iconic colors, as well as this communal space for people to come together. That was so beautiful about the Catskills. And I think it's really true to the Catskills beyond just the Jewish experience. There are so many groups that have kind of flocked to the Catskills because they were persecuted from going to other places. And it's like this place that has always accepted and been accepting of all. This is the Olympic pool in Poolorama at the Laurels. I met a manager at the Laurels, and he said the slogan was, go to the Laurels and lose your morals. The Laurels was a singles hotel as far as I've been told. And we will also revisit it when I show you my photographs, but we're kind of just cruising through time here. The new indoor pool and health club at the Laurels, that guy in the green jacket all the way on the right outside is my friend's father who worked at the hotel. And it kind of never ceases to amaze me all of the connections that I've learned about as I've made this book, as I've talked about the book, and met so many people who share very kind of collective stories of either working or vacationing there. And then in this case, kind of forever ending up in a postcard. This is the Browns. The Jerry Lewis Theater, 1968, packed with that beautiful red curtain and that lovely kind of triangular design against the stage. 1953. The book has a few essays in it, along with myself. There's an essay by Jenna Weissman Josselit. She is a historian. She writes for the Forward. She teaches at GW, and she wrote such an eloquent essay, not only about the history of the Borscht Belt and the rise and fall, but it's really witty. And she writes in one, photography and Catskills is like cream cheese to bagels. Like they just go hand in hand. Because here's a photograph being made, and then there's a guy at the pool making a photograph. And you know, what do we photograph and why do we photograph? We photograph like our greatest memories. They're in albums, they're cherished, they're these time capsules that we can just look back at. And photography is such a huge part of the vacation experience, as it was the Catskills experience. This is Lou Simon Says Goldstein. I was lucky to befriend his wife, the late Jackie Horner, a dancer at Grossinger's. But Lou was the tumbler. For those that don't know, it's kind of like an MC. He got everyone on the dance floor, kind of announcing what was going on. And here he is with his famous game of Simon Says, which he did 2 times a day at 10:35 and at 2:35 every day. This is the dining room at Kutcher's. So I mentioned that my grandpa was a card shark, and we lived down the street as a kid, my family and I. So we'd get dropped off, and I never ate in a Borscht Belt dining room. But when I found this photograph, to me, anything that I had been told about it was like it rang true. Um, you have on the left this girl kind of looking on quietly with glasses, and then there's a man blowing his nose, and then there's these two women kind of like exchanging a piece of bread, and they're like in this other guy's dance space. He's choking on his food. And then there's another man on the right just enjoying his food. And they're surrounded by table 89. The Borscht Belt was like all you can eat, order 5 steaks, send them back. And I just look at this photograph and I hear clinking, and it's loud and it's chaotic. And it's exactly what like a Jewish table to me is. And this was by Ken Reagan in the 80s. This is just the staff of the dining room at Kutcher's. Just the staff. So many hotels employed people. It was their livelihood. It was their life. It was not just a summer job. And the sad factor is when the tourism region did falter economically, culturally, so many ways. The area really experienced a depression that only it has been resurfacing in recent years from. But the menus of the dining room were amazing, and each hotel had its own font, color scheme. And this is the menu at the Nemerson from July 29, 1969. You could order 3 juices, 4 soups, 7 different entrees, 5 cold plates, 7 desserts, and then all the events that would happen. Indoor pool. My favorite is a happening with Murray Waxman. I would love to beam back in a time machine and go to that. Bingo, arts and crafts, swimming, and then the nightlife. So these venues are great. And a lot of these items are in my book. I was a big collector on eBay for a while. This is Esther Manor, another hotel. So there were so many different hotels: 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, kosher, non kosher, kind of kosher. There was a hotel for Jewish cross-dressers. This is just a kind of slide that shows you there were 50,000 bungalows, not colonies, bungalows, singular cabins, sometimes shared. But these are 3 ads for Slavin's bungalows with a new filtered swimming pool, sports, super close to things, Wiss Wigwam in Ferndale, and Rosenberg's bungalow colony. I'm also a child of a bungalow. My grandmother went to a bungalow colony outside of Allenville, and up until the summer before the pandemic, she went to a bungalow colony in Monroe for 50 years. This is probably my favorite photograph. I found this on the Catskills Institute site. It's a source created by Phil Brown, who is a historian of the Catskills, who created a conference that was lasting for many years. But you could go on the Catskills Institute site and type in dates or names or hotels, and up come these beautiful high-res photographs. So you have these 4 women. They look so classy and elegant, and they're seated at a bungalow colony in Monticello, 1943 in the summer. You see the bungalow in the back, and it just feels like it's just full of joy. Of course, I went through my own family archives once I really got deep into this book. This is my grandma Ruth and my grandpa Jack, up in the Catskills where they met, probably sometime after they met. My grandparents, my grandma Hattie and my grandpa Benny at the Nevele on their honeymoon. And more images of my mom's family. And my mom is that little girl at a bungalow colony. And I'm sure everyone has these, just these memories, these albums. People don't print out photographs anymore. So to find these are just like these gems. And these are my grandparents on the left, and my grandfather and his friends playing cards on the right. And a lot of people always like to say when I was doing these talks in person, "Oh, you're too young to know the Borscht Belt." Well, there's me in the water wings in a bungalow colony. And there's me with my grandpa Jack rowing on the lake at Kutcher's. And when I think of this time, it's very bittersweet. I recently lost both of my grandmothers in the last 8 weeks. And my grandfathers have been gone for a long time. But I just think of this joyful time where life was just like full of youth for so much of my family. And I walked back to that lake not too long ago, and it's heavy. This is the best postcard. This is called the Take It Easy, and it's for the traveler to the Borscht Belt who's so busy having so much fun that they don't have any time to write. So you just check off your little box. Dear husband, I am blue. The place here is dry. I do lots of thinking of you. I need cash. Business is improving. I wish you would write oftener. I miss you. I will be seeing you with love. This is from Swan Lake, but many different towns produce these. There was always a different drawing in the middle. Ironically, it was always a drawing, not a photograph. But these are great. The Take It Easy. Oh, he's just amazing. So it's you can't talk about the Borscht Belt without talking about the celebrity presence, from Paul Newman looking just like a god in his Grossinger's shirt, to Eddie Fisher, who got married at Grossinger's with Liz Taylor, but previously had brought Debbie Reynolds there to get married as well. Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Sammy Davis Jr., that's another one of Eddie Fisher. I mean, it was just a celebrity hotspot. In addition to a place where dignitaries and big political and cultural figures went. This is Eleanor Roosevelt walking with Jenny Grossinger through the lobby at Grossinger's, and Dr. Martin Luther King giving a speech at a rabbinical conference in 1968. Golda Meir in the dining room at Grossinger's. I love that one. And then in addition to the big celebrity presence, the Borscht Belt had a huge sports kind of thing going on. You have Floyd Patterson, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, Wilt Chamberlain, who was a bellhop at Kutcher's. And so many of these amazing athletes trained at these hotels and started out at these hotels. Then there's comedy. For people that know nothing about the Borscht Belt, all you have to do is, say names. The first one may be controversial, but Woody Allen, um, Sid Caesar, Freddie Roman, Toady Fields, Rodney Dangerfield, Henny Youngman, Mel Brooks. What an amazing man. Joan Rivers, Seinfeld. I remember seeing billboards for Seinfeld when I was a kid in like 1990 before his show, and he had acts at the Concord. And Joan Rivers always spoke so lovingly about the Catskills. I looked in Rodney Dangerfield's archives when I was making this book, and he had a list and it said mountain jokes versus city jokes because he was trying out his material in the Catskills. And Mel Brooks was so kind to give me a quote for the book. And he also included that he got fired from a hotel for not being funny enough. So it just kind of shows that these comedians just told their worst jokes, bombed off the stages, and they made their impact though, because they graduated to American television and movies. And that's where the Borscht Belt collides with American popular culture, because between the birthplace of stand-up comedy and also the presence of musicians, I don't even have a slide for it, but Janis Joplin, The Who, Fleetwood Mac, The Doors, I mean, you name it. Jethro Tull, they're all over the Borscht Belt, plus other bands. So we're kind of moving through time. Here we are in the 70s. This is a beautiful series made by Ronnie Stevens Goodman and appeared in the forward. I love these color photographs. They're just so of their time, the style. And I think it's probably groups of people that were going up whose parents probably met in the Catskills, and they were going up to hopefully maybe meet someone that they could date. Singles weekends. There were also efforts to try to bring back crowds, because by this time, and I will talk about it briefly, the crowds in the Borscht Belt started to dwindle in the 70s. This is early 80s at the Pines Hotel. Around the late 80s, a man named John Margulies traveled through America. And in his travels, he spent some time in the Borscht Belt. The Library of Congress actually released these photographs a few years ago. This is the Browns. But what I love about Margulies is no one really is in most of the photographs. They're the hotels just before they close, but in their beautiful, pristine condition. But they're very quiet. So these are all headlines from 1996. I was a lifeguard at the Concord that summer. It was my first job. And that fall, they told us the Concorde was closing. And these are all headlines that came out of that season. In the Catskills, resort's death darkens the view. Our towns, a tradition and a resort at twilight. Grocingers to remain closed during Passover. Hotel in Catskills sold to Brooklyn Company, and the hills were alive with the sound of tumbling. I could probably talk about that forever, like why it ended, but the main reasons that people love to fire out, and I think all valid, the boom of the airline industry where you can now get on a plane and fly to multiple different countries. The cruise industry where you can see 5 countries in 4 days. The proliferation and the growth of the suburbs where people were not trekking up to the Catskills to escape the Lower East Side and the stifling heat of the city. They had moved to the suburbs. Some people say the changing role of women in the workforce, the family dynamics changed. 1965 was the year historians say the Borscht Belt started to decline, and that was actually the year that President Johnson signed the Anti-Discrimination Act that once people of color, Jews, and minorities were banned from going to certain establishments in America. Now they were allowed. So I think this was a big turning point because Jews now were able to go to the places that they were never able to go. So the Catskills became old and the food became stale in a way, and the acts became kind of tedious. Um, and there's many other reasons, I think. I also do believe that everything just kind of has its time and its season. And unfortunately, it just did pass. Um, and it is very bittersweet. Um, these are photo viewers, ashtrays, paperweights, and stationery. The legacy that it did leave behind is huge. And it seems to just keep getting deeper and with time and more vast because as the Catskills sees a reinvention now and a rebirth. There's a looking to the past, to the era of the Borscht Belt. And I think people are finding out about it more than they ever have, unless they like experienced it and lived it or their families lived it. It's been written on between books from Stephen Canfor, um, books by John Conway, which are all archival. The Fromers, they did a great book documenting people's memories. Joey Adams, Cindy Adams's late husband, wrote a book about the Borscht Belt. Phil Brown, historian, wrote many books. So there's a lot out there. And there's also movies where the Borscht Belt has just been kind of cemented in Hollywood via Dirty Dancing, A Walk on the Moon, which is actually my personal favorite. It shows the bungalow colony experience. It has a great soundtrack. Then there's Sweet Lorraine and Billy Crystal's Mr. Saturday Night. So really, it kind of now leads up to this period of time where I'm going to shift gears. I had always been interested in photography. I had picked up a camera when I was 15 and went to college to get my bachelor's in photography, moved out to California and worked at a photography museum for about 6 years. And then in 2009, I decided to go back to school. And around 2010, 11, I was really struggling with what I wanted to say as a photographer. Some of my earlier projects were about Holocaust survivors. I had always had this string of Jewish history running through my work. There was always an interest in history. And I was really grappling with what to photograph. You'd think living in San Diego, California was inspiring. It wasn't for me. I appreciated a sunset, but I was never the type to be the one that was going to photograph them. I think I was looking for more substance or something to connect to. So a mentor of mine named Arthur Ullman gave me advice, and that advice began this book. And he said, Marissa, when you don't know what to shoot, you shoot what you know. So shoot what you know was really the impetus that lit a fire that allowed me to be obsessed with the Borscht Belt for 5 years and still like loving talking about it at any chance that I get. I knew my hometown had this vibrant history. I knew that much of that history, including the people that had lived it, were fading away. And I knew that those remnants were lying there. So I began making trips home from San Diego on break, summer vacation, and started to work on this as a project. I started using rephotography. That's the act of repeat photography of the same place. It's a now and then. That's all it is. It's a visual method, though, that photographers have used since the inception of the medium to understand change. So, what you do is you take a postcard, and the Borscht Belt was replete with postcards. So, I found the Laurels Lakefront Promenade postcard. And then I went to the Laurels. And you line yourself up and you try to figure out where that photographer once stood to make an image. And the images get put together like a diptych. Immediately, it was like a treasure map. I found the postcard and I would just like drag a friend and go drive around and try to find this location. But besides being this treasure map, it was like a light went off in my head. This is the Pines Hotel indoor outdoor skating rink. And this light was like, whoa, what happens over time? What changes? What remains the same? Where can I find the things that like are the markers? The same arch is still there, but on the left, that cold ice skating rink now looks even colder when it's abandoned, and it feels like a skeletal form of itself. It was literally like the bones of the ice skating rink were left. This is the Laurels again, the bean-shaped pool, that beautiful pool. And then the bean-shaped pool when I found it when I began in 2011. And this was what I thought the book was going to be. It was going to be this now and then, just showing the process of time in roughly 50 years with each image. And I did it over and over. Sometimes it was successful, sometimes it was impossible. I wasn't always bringing ladders, and some structures were never there or had fallen down. This is Shanks Paramount Hotel, which is still there. This is the ice skating rink at Grossinger's. But the book has a few of them. But what quickly happened was, as I was leading along with my little treasure map, I saw something that kind of stopped me in my tracks. And it was that urge as a photographer that you have to just make a photograph, whether the lighting was beautiful or something was growing or something was just like really conceptually or compositionally interesting. That's how the series began. Really realizing that there was much more of a story to tell than the now and then. So the book begins with those now and then rephotographic images, and then it moves into the series. I'll try to talk to you about what's happening with each hotel, as well as documents, and documentation, as well as photographs. So Grossinger's closed in '89, and sometime between '89 and its next closing in the '90s, they decided to build this extravagant new lobby. And the lobby is on the left. It's not the structure with the windows, it's the structure that you see on the top left without the windows. And they built this carport. So then the hotel closes. And up until 2019, it had been sitting there. So when I found Grossinger's, the golf course was still open. And you see this disused driveway and this carport. And immediately a golf course came up to me, and a golf cart. And the golf cart was this man named James, who was a groundskeeper. And he gave me a tour of the hotel. And it was through these kind of serendipitous kind of actions where I forged friendships and talked to strangers and locals. And that's really how the project came together, as well as getting access, besides spending a lot of time there. But at first, I was just obsessed with finding any remnant that was of that time. These are stairs at the Tansville Hotel. The Tansville was a huge hotel and it burned in a fire. There is nothing left beyond these stone pillars, not even a foundation, not even a pool that's like dug into the earth. And these stone pillars were so beautiful to me because they had survived and they had persevered that fire and the raising of that hotel. And these beautiful flowers had grown out, and it was like this little garden. The Paramount Hotel is in Parksville. It became a Best Western. It's actually currently for sale. I'm like helping their realtor out here. But the Paramount was another hotel that I found. And really, I was just looking for anything that was left. And what I saw was this entropy, this complete abandonment. These are shuffleboard courts, again at the Paramount. I remember learning to play shuffleboard in the Borscht Belt with my grandpa. So this was kind of like a little homage to him. This is a lobby. at the Homoac Lodge in Spring Glen. The Homoac had become an Orthodox boys' camp, and then at some point it was sold by auction. It's currently still abandoned, but I loved how regal the lobby looked. It was in pretty good condition, it had lovely lighting coming in. The Stardust Room at the Nevele. Um, this hotel has had a lot of ups and downs. It's really hard to follow, but they were hoping to become a casino, and eventually that fell through, hoping to become a sporting complex. Um, and it still sits abandoned today. But that gold lame curtain still hung. It was that same curtain and those stars on the wall that were in that first postcard that I showed you. And this idea, of just like abandonment was everywhere. How long did this casino sit until everything kind of grew around it and then someone boarded it up? An unknown bungalow colony never found the name, which just proves to me that there are more than 538 hotels because there are so many unknowns. A guest room at the Paramount Hotel with these two lights that were by the bed. These lights are like these reading lights. They're iconic of American like travel from motel to hotel. And I love the texture on the wall. And you can actually kind of see my hands there, I realize now in the reflection. This is a guest room at the Tamarack Lodge, also another hotel that burned in a fire. I consider myself a photographer, but I also look at myself as an archaeologist. I'm really interested in kind of, those remnants of time. I always kind of joked and said, this was like my Indiana Jones project. But unlike an archaeologist, I don't tamper with the surface. A chisel is a camera. It's not something to set up. So none of these images are set up. My photographic religion is not to manipulate. I think photography can be really misleading and misinforming. And everything is made with a camera and film that I scan. And all the still lives are arranged by chance. There are many other people besides myself going in these hotels. So it became like these tableaus where I just have to move my body and figure out where I want to stand. This is Cooper's Sunrise Bungalow Colony. It's in Rock Hill. I was just actually living up in the Catskills for the last 9 weeks, working on a new book project. Some of it takes place in the Catskills. And this bungalow colony is being rehabbed. It's a beautiful bungalow colony, all the way at the end by Katrina Falls. But what I love about this picture is it has this lovely late summer light. And the bungalow colony is a little rickety and a little worn to me, as a bungalow should be. Feels very homey and comfortable. This is an outdoor pool at the Lesser Lodge, a small hotel in White Sulphur Springs, which is just outside of Liberty. After these themes started to come through of abandonment, the next theme happened, and it was apocalypse. Because again, I do not set these up. Someone stacked these up, whether it was the chef that was last there or someone else. And it was really wild just encountering these places where it felt like employees and people just left and never returned. This is a laundry room at Grossinger's. It still had sheets in it, but those sheets and the laundry baskets had rusted, and there was this patina of rust. But for me, I'm looking at light and I'm looking at composition and I'm looking at color. And it all began to stream through and kind of create this narrative of really loss, of time passing, of change in the American Jewish experience, change in kind of America at large. Because the Catskills really do exert this very powerful hold on the American Jewish experience. And in the book and in the photographs, there's this tension between this is Kutcher's, but look what happened. It really feels like there was a flood here. Um, and there's a tension between the man made and Mother Nature. And there's this cultural resonance there because these are ruins of the American Jewish experience. This is the kitchen at the Nevele. I love that diagonal, the pots and pans, and that light filtering in. This is a small hotel called the Hotel Leroy, which is on the grounds now of Sullivan County Community College in Loch Sheldrake. But this mutability and this constant shifting and the unpredictable nature of the spaces that I was photographing was really interesting. This is an elevator shaft at the Tamarack that had burned in a fire. This elevator shaft to me was like a totem pole. It was like a tombstone in a way, like we were once here. It is always kind of, I guess, mind-boggling to me, although we will see what happens in time, but there is no dedicated Borscht Belt museum in this country, not even in the Borscht Belt. There is, of course, the Jewish Museum in Philadelphia. There are historical societies in Sullivan County, but there is not one dedicated museum to the Catskills. There are plans, but a museum is a grand effort to build. So when I kind of see these sad totem poles, um, they're really kind of changed for me because they're so bold and they're so strong. And even though they maybe are empty places and are the guts of the hotels spilling out, they are a record. Um, and they're a record of memory and they're a record of place. This is a bowling alley at the Hungwack, and I love this bowling ball. It was like the blue earth. And it felt like the Catskills was the center of so many people's worlds. Um, when I later went back to the Hungwack, someone had taken a bat to those bowling ball encasements in the back. And there's been a lot of vandalism. There is a lot of scrapping, a lot of squatting, a lot of partying in these hotels. If you think about an area that had this rich wave of tourism and then a fallout, these abandoned places have been sitting. There's a lot of negligent landowners and landlords. There's a lot of political and economic issues going on, social, cultural issues. So people ask, like, why are these still standing? A lot of politics involved. But then some of the ones that are standing became repurposed, not as like what you'd think they would be. But in this case, this is a showroom that became a skate park. And this is the Black Magic showroom at the Commodore in Swan Lake. There were two Commodores, I am aware. This was the one in Swan Lake. Someone had taken all the chairs and thrown them in the back, and local kids had made a skate park. It's strange and it's bizarre and it's peculiar, but growing up in Sullivan County in 1995, when I was in high school, nothing was open. Grossinger's closed, the Concord closed, Kutcher's closed. The only thing that was open was like the bagel bakery. And as a kid, there was a lot of trouble to get into. And when I look at this and I see what kids in recent years have done, which is to take an old abandoned kind of hotel and turn it into a skate park because their own towns didn't have the funding for a skate park. I really think that's kind of like a beautiful reinvention, even if strange. Just like the dining room at the Pines with its beautiful hot pink chairs became a paintball battlefield. And when I found it, these tables were kind of angled in all different ways. Paintball is a game that people play where they shoot paint pellets at each other. And but the paint provided texture and color. It was pink and red and green and yellow. And I loved those hot pink chairs. I was just not walking away from them, and this peculiar repurposing existed everywhere. This is the lobby at Grossinger's, the lobby that they were planning on building after they went bankrupt and reopened. And my theory is that they started to paint, and you can see the top. It's a very like peach 80s color. And they spackled, and at some point the hotel closed. And since then, graffiti artists have gone in and decorated the place. But actually, this building and the entirety of Grossinger's is now a field. Um, there were many different plans, many different ideas proposed over the years. Um, Many different parts of it should have been deemed historic, as are the fact that there are no historic markers in Sullivan County anywhere marking the Borscht Belt. But then you see table 12, and amid all that tragedy and sadness, to me, I can kind of laugh, because who set up table 12? There was fake fruit and napkins twirled up. And again, I do not set these things up. It's just like these really kind of peculiar and odd situations with each hotel and why it's sitting. And they become these really interesting stories that are obviously about the past, about the ski chalet at the Nevele. But then there's something happening in the present. There are all these chairs facing one another, almost like a conversation was happening, or maybe a conversation had happened. And there are feathers on the floor, and you can see the turning over of time and animals that are kind of living in these spaces. But then the backdrop is beautiful. Those mid-century lights, and that lighting is great. I love that one. We think of ruins as places that are thousands of years old that we have to traipse towards the Middle East and Tibet and foreign ancient lands, but these are ruins right in America. Ruins by nature, I think, have a melancholy running through them, but they also have lessons. They have beauty as well as tragedy. And this is the indoor pool at Grossinger's. This is probably one of the most majestic structures I think that existed in the Catskills. It was built by Morris Lapidus, and it was torn down, like I mentioned. And a lot of the time when I was doing this project, I got a lot of flack at the beginning. A lot of people would say, "Oh, there's nothing there. There's nothing there." It would always be like, "Why do you want to go there? There's nothing there." It would be like over and over. And at first, I really didn't know what to say. Something inside of me just told me I should do this. It was this history of my hometown. But now I have an answer for those people that say that there's nothing there. My answer is that you're not looking. There is so much history, not only personal history of probably every single person in this room, in this Zoom room, um, but people across the world, collectively as Jews, as New Yorkers. It's a huge part of New York State and Catskill history. And I love this image, the Persian room, this red curtain that was there for decades. It's so lush and lovely, and then you move out and you see everything that's happened after that kind of era. The insulation from falling from the ceilings and the remnants of squatters and paintballers, and then Mother Nature, who is kind of the next theme. Mother Nature is powerful, and she has been reclaiming many Borscht Belt hotels. This is the Palms, which was known as El Dorado and the Zyger. I had shown you a black and white image earlier on of the lobby. But when I found it, the only thing that you could see was the S in the word palms. Everything else was completely being swallowed up. Oh, about the palms. It was purchased by a bungalow colony adjacent to it and completely knocked down. And I hope no one attends that bungalow colony in this room. I don't mean to offend you, but they are the most barrack, cold, uncharacteristic looking condos. And when I drove by, to me, that's what's heartbreaking, because it's like, well, who would know that that hotel existed and all of the things that happened at that place? Um, so to me, even though a lot of these photographs are really sad, the photograph acts as a record. It acts as this slice, this documentation. This is a greenhouse at Grossinger's, and it was just as beautiful and alive as when it grew all of the herbs, but it was wild and untamed. These are stairs at the Pines going from the outdoor pool into the Persian room that I showed you a little bit before, and an up close version where you really can't tell where the man made, like, astro green and Mother Nature, which is kind of eating up that astro green with moss. They're kind of fighting this weird battle, but I think we all know that Mother Nature will kind of like slowly cover that, and it will be a carpet of moss. This is also the Pines. Oh, the Pines. The Pines is if you know Fallsburg, it's in town. So because of its location, it has been a problem with local police for a very long time, with people living in the hotel, breaking it apart. It is now going to be knocked down at the end of the summer. But I saw that blue chair that someone had thrown in there, and it bounced off the blue sky. And those white chairs in the background felt like these dinosaur bones. It felt like the La Brea tar pits in California. And they become these very peculiar still lives. A lobby at Esther Manor with a carpet of moss. How long does that take? 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, for this to morph. Um, and of course, there's this pathos running through the project. I'm fully aware of that. But I do believe that there are these kind of stories embedded in all of these places. This to me is the kind of photograph that I am trying to always make. It's one that has the past, present, and the future in the same frame. The past is the Jenny G building. Jenny G was the matriarch of Grossinger's. She had her own wing. Um, and this is a guest room in that. The present was this bird among many birds that I had found living. The whole building was a sanctuary for birds. They were flying up and down the hallways. And the future is this beautiful green plant that had grown up out of the ashes of a fire that someone lit on the ground. These are basketball courts at Kutcher's. Kutcher's was like 90% knocked down, and then that plan was abandoned to build a yoga retreat down the street. It's called Yo One. It's open currently, and it's quite beautiful. But I'll never understand why they knocked down 90% of the hotel to move down the street to build something new. But I love these basketball courts, the blue sky, the white courts with the tracks of an animal, and the red wrapped around the basketball. As a photographer, you're looking at color, you're looking at light, you're looking at composition while trying to capture these spaces. Breezy Corners is another sad story. The day I pulled up was like this overcast day, as you see. And I saw that there was a demo and a construction truck on the property. And normally I get permission. I harass local police or owners and call them constantly and kind of, tell them, oh, it's so important. I need to include this in the book about the Borscht Belt and give them my whole spiel. And in this case, I walked into the construction trailer. I thought about like going back later and trespassing, but something told me just go now. And I walk into the construction trailer and a friend from high school was sitting there. So again, it's like these kind of serendipitous things that began to happen. And that's how like it just kept me going for 5 years. And they gave me a hard hat and I walked through that day and they knocked down Breezy Corners that afternoon. Someone's drawing all over the place there. This is the White Lake Mansion House, and this was an early hotel. And it just kind of shows this cycle of birds, whether it's a shedding or a birth or a death. I look at the project also as a cycle of life. This is the indoor pool at Grossinger's. When I made it, I knew that it was going to be the cover of the book. It had this lone pool chair that was in really beautiful condition, and it sat there among this mossy green carpet of moss, and it felt like a vanished world. And that really is kind of what it is. This is the indoor pool at Grossinger's, the sublime experience of not really knowing what I was going to find that day, and then finding a plant growing up through inches of ice. So beautiful and strong. Were really this kind of unexpected kept me really intrigued. Um, this is the outdoor pool at Perlin's. I just drove by this actually a couple weeks ago. I love this hotel, or sorry, this bungalow colony. All that's left is the pool. But the day that I made this photograph, there were these vines and they were so thick and they were draped over the pool like a canopy. So I always call her Sleeping Beauty. And someone had thrown piles and piles of dirt into the pool. Like it's like you're not going to make the pool go away by throwing dirt in it. But there's a forest now kind of growing out of the pool. And occasionally they cut it down and then it grows back. This is the Nevele in Ellenville. Not all the images are all about entropy and kind of decay, and that was really important to me. I loved how kind of new this looked and shiny, so that there was this range of, not only these kind of images that looked empty like this, with insulation and whatnot, but images that were a little more pristine. This is the Lennon Hotel in Liberty upstairs at that one of those first hotels in the region. A hallway at Grossinger's that looked like a scene out of a Stanley Kubrick film. All of those doors were open, and I just put my camera on a very long exposure and, made this kind of, I feel like a little cinematic. This is a behind the scenes of just kind of like the project. Not always were people welcoming. After I got the there's nothing there, I would often get kind of kicked off of properties if I didn't ask for permission. And this was at the Young's Gap Hotel in Parksville. But there were so many people instrumental to making this project happen, from local police to local landowners to local lawyers who were representing the owners, to friends who came with me because they're very kind of tenuous, unstable places. It was always kind of more important to me to be safe, obviously, but be able to make the image, and not have to worry about what or whom I might encounter. Um, oh, I love this one. This is another for me, past, present, future, real strong one. You have the tamarack, that guest room, the phone off the hook, the unmade bed that I found. And on the left, you have kind of Mother Nature creeping in. And on the right, there's like this dark black kind of like hole. And I love the light and the dark in this photograph, and that blue wall to me is just such a beautiful blue. A prayer book that I found open at the Homoac. Very odd to leave a prayer book behind in Judaism. They're like not really things that we leave laying on the floor. Poker chips and cards. I made this for my grandpa, the card shark. But there were checks on the floor and all of these kind of strange things that began to kind of be left behind. Ice skates at the Homoac, and another pair of ice skates that looked like they had been through a lot more than the previous pair. A check-in logbook at the Concord, logging in visitors and guests. I did this all 4 seasons. Obviously, the Borscht Belt was well known during the summer, but the winter provided color and texture and pattern. So really going through in all 4 seasons was very important to me. Not only going back to each place multiple times, but really studying it and respecting it and learning more about it each time. This is the Browns Hotel, which had a, I'll say, quote, mysterious fire. Unfortunately, it was condos. Those people are still displaced, and there are still lawsuits and litigations going on. But I begged and begged them to let me photograph the hotel because I was worried that they were going to knock it down. So they let me go in that day, and you can see the sprinklers were still going off. But I've seen on many Facebook groups, people are just walking in there in the last few weeks. So it seems to be unmonitored, and there's no security there anymore. Not to say go, but a lot of times people do want to go. But there's certain hotels that you can go to and certain that I would advise not to. But I would not condone the trespassing. Nevertheless, the ice skating rink at the Nevele, oh, this is such a beautiful structure, and I really do hope they save this. I feel like if it's ever going to go be knocked down, I'm just going to sit in front of it and petition. This is the inside of that ice skating rink. Really beautiful pagoda style, mid-century with a little kind of flair. Breezy Corners, that bungalow colony that was ripped to shreds, where Jethro Tull and The Who, and I found some Fleetwood Mac posters that they played there. Someone once told me a great story about the Catskills, the Borscht Belt. They were on their way to the Raleigh, which is down the street from Breezy Corners, to see a band, and the opener canceled. And they said some band named Led Zeppelin was going to be the second act. And who the hell know who is Led Zeppelin? So it just kind of shows that like Led Zeppelin was this fill-in band, and look at what Led Zeppelin has become. But again, this rising of not only comedians, but musicians, and how the Borscht Belt was really like their stepping stone. This is the Revolution Room at Breezy Corners where all those bands played. And in the back where you see those sand piles was when they were building the casino, Resorts World, which opened a few years ago, obviously closed during the intense months of the pandemic, but has recently reopened. Um, my whole life they've been waiting for a casino in the Catskills like a messiah. Um, I do not believe it's the messiah, but I believe it's one of many things that is helping to reinvent the Catskills. It is providing jobs, it's providing a destination. There are restaurants, there's a water park. It's really beautiful. And it is on the grounds of Breezy Corners and the Concord. But there are many other things going on in Sullivan County as we speak. Revitalizations happening from the top of the county all the way to the bottom, east and west. This is the Concord. And if you've ever been to the Concord, It was known for these pine trees. They lined the driveways when you went in and out. And when I photographed it, they had knocked down the hotel. I wasn't able to make it home. This is an early part of the project. And I felt really displaced because going there as a kid and then going back and seeing this like rubble and literally the copper wires that built the hotel just like in a pile felt very displacing and very tragic. But I saw those pine trees and kind of lined up myself with both. The Borscht Belt really reigned supreme for over 50 years. It was and has made its mark on the American Jewish imagination, experience, and memory. Its passing left a scar on the earth and on the county, and this is the scar of the Concord. But if you look in the back, that beauty of the Catskills is what people have been coming to the Catskills for many, many years. And it's what they will continue to return to the Catskills to find, whether they're led there by a slot machine or by a reinvention of it being a foodie destination, or local breweries or artists that are moving up there, or many people that are relocating from Manhattan due to its prices as well as the pandemic. I've never seen such a boom in the area in the last 5 years that I had seen already happening. So beyond the rubble is that kind of like emerald, beautiful city out there. And that reinvention and that newness kind of comes through in this photograph where you see a fern growing out of an outdoor pool, like something new growing out of the old. And although the Borscht Belt can never be, and you can never really recreate that greatness, you can't ever recreate. It just doesn't happen. It needs to naturally, organically happen. Um, Something new will happen. And this is the last image. It's the coffee shop, devoid of the counter. It kind of symbolizes the falling of that empire that was known as the Borscht Belt. And this book is not only an elegy to the Borscht Belt, but I also like to say in the same sentence that it's a celebration. And I hope that you were brought back to maybe a memory or learned something about the area tonight. Or if you thought my presentation was going to be solely sad, I hope I might have changed your mind about the nature of images and how deeply they can be read. This is the last thing I'll end with before I wrap up and we'll do a Q&A. I found this book. It's called The Works of Love. And I loved this so much that it's the first page of the book. And I'll read it quickly because it sums up everything that I feel about the project. It was like in 1968, he wrote this for me to find. Um, in the dry places, men begin to dream. Where the rivers run sand, there is something in man that begins to flow. West of the 98th meridian, where sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't, towns like weeds spring up when it rains and dry up when it stops. But in a dry climate, the husk of the plant remains. The stranger might find, as if preserved in amber, something of the green life that was once lived there, and the ghosts of men who have gone to a better place. The withered towns are empty but not uninhabited. Faces sometimes peer out from the broken windows, or whisper from the sagging balconies, as if this place, now that it is dead, had come to life. As if empty, it is forever occupied. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. The book has 129 images and 3 essays. I will put in a minute, oops, these are going too fast, in the chat. I will put in the chat this code for everyone. If anyone is interested in purchasing the book, Cornell Press, which is my publisher, is offering a $10 off discount to any attendees tonight. You don't have to just buy it tonight. It's valid for forever, that code. And then if anyone does feel like taking a ride to the Catskills on Saturday, July 3rd, I'm doing just a book signing, not a book talk, at one of my favorite stores in the Catskills. It's in Hurleyville, which is a town experiencing a full revitalization. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate you all being here. And thank you to Stan. Thank you to the Temple for inviting me. I'm really humbled that I'm still asked to speak about this so many years after it's come out. And it really is about this place that I love. So I hope that came through.
Marissa, I just want to say, I've heard this now twice, and it makes me feel as if you've brought me there, and I was never there. And I told you that before, and it's based on the chat and what I've been reading along the way, which I know you haven't been able to read. Tremendous comments, a lot of reminiscences. And I want to ask Samantha, I don't know if this is possible, but can you capture the chat and email it to myself and to Marissa? I think that would be a lot of fun. Also, I want to say that I really expected mostly people who were in their 50s, 60s, 70s to be listening. And I want to read you a very short chat item. It says, I am 19 years old. My grandfather and his sister visited as children. As someone who is definitely too young to remember this, I wish I could. And I thought that was really very nice. So thank you for bringing this to life. The pictures are amazing. Your narrative is terrific. I'm so excited to have the chance to see it again. And I certainly think everyone is feeling the same way. So Samantha, can you, and by the way, thank you, Samantha, too, for being such a good Zoom hostess. We appreciate that, too. So can we move into some Q&A? Do we have, I mean, it's already almost 9:15. Can you take 3 or 4 questions? There's hand up. And so,
yes.
okay.
I see Alex has a question. I will unmute you. There you go.
Hi, Marissa. Absolutely fantastic. I'm a Brit and I stayed up and it's 2 o'clock-ish in the morning UK time. So probably I visited the Catskills and Grossinger's and the Concord because of the cantorial conventions. So the Cantors Association and the JTS always held conventions there, and some of the greatest singers in the world. You never mention anything to do with conventions or cantorial music, because that was the home in the sort of 60s and early 70s of that sort of music, and hundreds and hundreds of people used to attend the 2 big hotels, the Concord and Grossinger's. And you also never mentioned fabulous film, Jenny Grossinger, This Is Your Life, which was, I think it was introduced by Eddie Cantor. And I think that's still available, but it's a fabulous film, recollections of with Jenny's life, you know, and what she did for Israeli and Jewish charities, and et cetera, et cetera. So are those things in your book and you didn't talk about them, or?
You know, there's the Borscht Belt is so jam-packed with history and information and occurrences and events. So I think I talked about Martin Luther King at the Cantor and Rabbinical Conference, but no, like I don't really get into all that in my book. My book is a photographic book where I wrote an essay. The essay is about 5 pages about my connection with the area and history. And there's another essay written by a historian and one by a sociologist. I just did a huge Twitter post about Jenny Grossinger yesterday. Yesterday was actually Jenny Grossinger Day in 1968 that was declared by the governor of New York. So, you know, there's so much to touch on. I touched on what I felt came into my brain at that time. I don't mean to disappoint, but there's not much on any cantors. But there are other sources of books, many that I showed, that you can go to the Catskills Institute and find a plethora of information on any subgenre of the Borscht Belt.
Marissa, I was far from disappointed in your talk. I was absolutely ecstatic and mesmerized and focused completely on what you were saying.
Thank you. And on Zoom, I can't believe it. Oh my goodness. It's hard to talk on Zoom. You feel like you're talking to yourself.
Tell me about it. But thank you so much for giving me pleasure and memories.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have a question from Lester.
Hi, I grew up in the Catskills in South Paulsburg, and there are 2 interesting topics which Marissa hasn't covered, and perhaps in your next book you would consider it. The first is the life of all of the people in that area that supported all of the hotels and bungalow colonies. You know, we had people that owned gas companies, and people owned appliance stores, and people that owned laundries. It was a very vibrant part of the society there. The second is that where did the people come from? The Jews, where did they come from when they settled in the Catskills? Recently, I joined a group called Nefesh, which was the New England Hebrew Farmers of the Emmanuel Society.
Mhm.
And Lord Emmanuel from England, Baron de Hirsch, excuse me, supported a lot of Jews coming into this country. My grandparents actually settled in Eastern Connecticut first, and then they moved to Woodburn later, were farmers and owned a hotel. But those might be areas where you might look for your next book.
So, okay, to your first question, all of the locals and stuff. You know, I made a series of Borscht belters of people that worked at the hotels and primarily workers. It was just something I did on the side, and it's on my website. But as for making a book about people that owned like oil companies and all of these businesses up there, not really my bag.
Okay.
But there are books by the Fromers in particular that interviewed people in the 80s that lived and worked up there. So there are interview books about that. But you know, a book is a long process to make, and I'm working on another. It's not going to be about the Borscht Belt. I don't mean to disappoint.
So,
But it is going to have similar themes, and it is going to be about other histories in the Hudson Valley and the Catskills. But with the Jews that were coming in, my own family came from Poland and Russia by way of getting pushed out of Germany. So I think Jews were coming in primarily from Eastern Europe, immigrating to the Lower East Side and Chicago, and then dispersing and coming up to the Catskills. I think that's what I think.
okay, thank you. It was a very good talk.
Thank you.
Next, we have a question from Sarah Richmond.
Can you unmute?
Yeah, you're
Are you unmuted? Okay. Hi, it's actually Will Richmond. That was a wonderful talk. Congratulations. In the late 1960s, I spent a few summers with my family as a young kid at a bungalow colony called the Gratis. And I'm just wondering if you ever came across that, Marissa.
I did not, but you know, I'm gonna find right now. I have a link to the Catskills Institute, and I'll put it in the chat because,
Okay.
like I said, there were Phil Brown and ex-historians and John Conway, who's unbelievable, Sullivan County historian, have kind of made a big website, and it has as much as they can like have on there, but there are so many hotels.
Right.
And
Okay.
I'm going to put a link in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
So that link goes to the repository library at Northeastern University. And you can go at that link and you can, I'll just share my screen real quick so everyone can see. So you can basically go here to the Catskills Institute and you can type in South Fallsburg. That's already in the chat. And then here comes up everything they have on South Fallsburg. So postcards, they have photographs, they have brochures, and you can just click on it. Oh, that one didn't work, but you can just click on them and then you can just download. So if you want it, you can type in like the name of that. What was the name of the one?
Gradus, Gradus, I think.
There it is, Hotel Gratis. So that site, I'll put it in the link for you. Amazing site. I used it. I still use it. A lot of my images from the presentation came from that site. It has a lot. So check that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Next,
questions?
we have one from Reuven. I'll unmute you. There you go.
Hi, Marissa. Thank you so much. As I mentioned in the chat, my father, may he rest in peace, was a regular performer up in the Catskills. His name was Joey Russell. And I then became sort of the resident children's entertainer at many Concord, Grossinger's, Kutcher's, Neville, all those. Are you familiar? Elaine Edis has a little video YouTube interview channel where she has collected many interviews with people who have been connected, specifically with Grossingers in her case.
Mhm.
She interviewed me 3 times. I was wondering if you were a part of that at all.
No, Elaine came to a talk of mine and I got really, really nervous because I was worried about her response about how she would feel about seeing the place she grew up in ruins. And I got very nervous, which was kind of unlike me at that moment because I felt really great about the project until she walked in and I was like, oh, there's a Grossinger. Um, but she thanked me for making the book and said that she always felt like that hotel would be there and that they were all really naive to think that it was gonna kind of never go away. But she has not asked me to be in her interview series, but I do not take offense to that. I was just so thankful that the Grossinger family, as well as the Parker family, came out to a talk and seemed to kind of appreciate the book because I think for a lot of people, I think it's very easy to just like label it as sad. Um, but I try to think of it as going beyond that, as a record and a document, no matter what the places look like. These are the records because I think I said out of 50 or 60 hotels and bungalow colonies, I think in the book, like less than half are there now. And the book came out in November of 2016. So that's not that much time for like half the places, you know, 25 places to just be like gone.
And
So
when you drive up Route 17 today, at least it was a year ago, if that main Grossinger building still stands.
it's
And
gone.
that main building is now gone.
It's totally gone.
It must have happened in the last year then, right?
Happened in late 2019 and they kept tearing it down until like the pandemic like the lockdown, whatever you want to call it, began. It's gone. There is nothing left at Grossinger's. It's a
About
field.
10 years ago, my kids went to a camp, like an exit or two beyond exit 99 on 17. They went to a camp there. And on my way back, one day I pulled into Grossinger's and I guess you can call it trespassed.
Yeah.
Saw the pool just the way it's shown in your book. And I actually went into the building and I saw on the floor menus, old menus on the cardboard sheets. I saw programs of the evening's entertainment kind of a thing, and I took a bunch of it and I just brought it home with me. But anyway, wonderful book, bittersweet, and thank you.
Thank you.
Let me jump in for a minute. I don't know if we have any more comments or questions, but we've been going for almost an hour and a half. And I just want to say that the seed for the idea of doing Yiddish programming was born at the last adult education committee meeting that we could have before the pandemic. And there were 3 sessions in the fall. This is the 3rd of the spring and the last one that's currently scheduled. If anybody has any ideas of things that you think would be appropriate to continue this conversation, we've had music, we've had film, we've had this presentation, Marissa, and other things in the fall. I would be grateful for you to pass the ideas forward to us because the hard work is the fun work. And then to sit back here and enjoy this presentation the way I have and to see almost 150 people stick with you all through was really gratifying for me. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of all of us. Truly outstanding, really delightful, and you're a great speaker and a great photographer, and I hope that your next book is tremendously successful. So for those who are interested, you can find the book at Marissa's website and Cornell University Press. And again, thank you so much. By the way, the video will be edited down and it will be published. I think, Samantha, would it be correct on the Temple Emmanuel YouTube page?
Yes.
So 4 or 5 days from now, once it's chopped up, not the middle, but I mean the ends and so forth, the introduction. So if you want to see it there, forward it to other people, view it again. And I just want to say to my friend Judy, who I see on the screen right now, hi Judy. This is someone I grew up with. Her husband Jerry. We were crazy kids in first grade, and we're still friendly today. So they're in New Jersey. Hi Jerry. Hi Judy. And thank you everybody for being here. And Samantha, if you can grab the chat, I don't know if that's possible. I'd love to be able to read through it. There were tons of great comments and very exciting. So thank you, everyone. Marissa, a special thanks to you. And
Thank you, Stan. Thank you,
oh.
everyone who's here. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Samantha. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, Samantha, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.